Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Ever feel like, I don't know, your brain is kind of stuck in the Stone Age?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I can see that.
Like battling cravings for donuts,
No, yeah.
but also stressing over deadlines and like a million news alerts at the same time?
It's so true.
Well, that feeling,
Yeah.
it actually makes a lot of sense.
It does.
And that's what Ancestral Mindset by John Daniel really dives into.
Yeah.
He argues that our brains
Yeah.
primarily evolved for,
Right.
hunting and gathering on the African savanna.
Yeah.
They're facing a serious mismatch
Yeah.
with the complexities of today's world.
It's fascinating how we often feel that disconnect between our instincts and the
Right.
demands of modern life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this mismatch,
Yeah.
as Daniel calls it,
Mm.
explains a lot
Mm.
about our modern struggles.
Absolutely.
I mean,
yeah.
think about it. For
Yeah.
the vast majority of human history,
Right.
we lived in small tribes,
Yep.
constantly on the move,
Mhm.
focused on immediate survival.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then, boom,
Uh-huh.
agriculture explodes onto the scene.
Relatively recent.
So recently,
yeah.
and suddenly we're living in settlements,
Mhm.
dealing with social hierarchies,
Yeah.
and facing a whole new
Yeah.
set of challenges.
To really grasp the scale of this shift, he uses this brilliant analogy.
Okay.
Imagine squeezing all of human history
Okay.
into a single calendar year.
Okay.
Agriculture doesn't even appear until December 31st.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
So everything we consider modern
Mm-hmm.
happens in basically
Yeah.
the last few minutes of that year?
The last few minutes.
No wonder we haven't quite caught
And
up.
we're still adjusting, right.
Exactly.
And this brings us to the concept of evolutionary mismatch.
Okay.
The idea that our brains are still catching up
Yeah.
to this rapid shift in our environment.
So can you give me some examples of
Yeah.
how this mismatch plays out in our lives?
Well, let's take those cravings, for example.
Oh, yeah.
In a world of scarcity,
Mm-hmm.
our ancestors needed to gorge themselves
Okay.
on calorie-rich foods whenever they could.
When they could get it.
Yeah, but now that instinct leads to overeating and health problems.
Right, because now we have abundance.
Exactly, abundance everywhere.
Our poor hunter-gatherer brains just can't catch break.
Struggling to keep up.
It's not just food cravings, though, right?
No, not at all.
What about,
Yeah.
the fight-or-flight response?
Oh, that's a big one.
Crucial for escaping predators
Mhm.
on the savannah.
Absolutely.
But in today's world,
Yeah.
it's triggered by work deadlines,
Oh, yeah.
social media drama.
All the time.
It's leading to chronic stress.
Yeah, exactly.
Our bodies are stuck in perpetual,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, a saber-toothed tiger.
Right. That constant state of alert,
Yeah,
our stress response hasn't quite adapted
right?
to differentiate between real threats and
Yeah.
perceived ones.
How do we even...
Yeah.
It's tricky for our brains.
Okay.
Now, Daniel also digs into the negativity bias.
Yeah.
Our tendency to focus on bad news more than good news.
Right.
It makes sense from a survival standpoint, right?
Yeah.
If you're constantly looking out for danger,
You're more likely to avoid it.
you're going to stay safe.
But how does that play out in the modern world?
It can make us
It's a
overly
further route.
pessimistic,
Okay.
risk-averse.
Mm-hmm.
We might dwell on negative feedback at work
Yeah.
or overestimate the likelihood of bad things happening.
So recognizing this bias
Yeah.
is key to being able to
Absolutely.
approach things
Yeah.
with a more balanced perspective.
It can help us focus on the positive.
Right, and see the good things
Exactly.
that are happening.
Mm.
Okay, so understanding these
Yeah.
evolutionary mismatches.
It's incredibly empowering.
Yeah.
It allows us to reframe our struggles and develop strategies for navigating
Yeah.
the modern world more effectively.
So another fascinating aspect he explores
Okay.
is the social brain.
Yeah.
How deeply wired we are
Yeah.
for connection and belonging.
We are social creatures, yeah.
Think about it. Our ancestors
Yeah.
couldn't survive alone.
No.
They relied on each other
Right.
for protection, for food sharing,
Yeah.
raising children.
Mm.
This intense interdependence shaped our brains to prioritize social connection.
Speaking of connection,
Yeah.
I went to a Steelers game
Okay.
in Baltimore a few years ago.
Right.
Enemy territory, right.
Uh-huh. Right.
But being surrounded
Yeah.
by other Steelers fans
Mm-hmm.
created such a powerful
Yeah.
sense of belonging.
Absolutely.
We were high-fiving, chanting,
Oh, nice.
feeling this incredible camaraderie.
It's amazing how our
Yeah.
brains are wired for that tribalism.
It is.
We crave that belonging
Yeah.
and often form strong bonds with those who share
Yeah.
our values or interests.
That really makes you realize, how deep-seated that need for connection really is.
Yeah.
It's not just about having friends.
No.
It's about feeling like you're
Yeah.
part of something bigger
Yes.
than yourself.
Absolutely. Daniel uses a fascinating example.
Okay.
From the company AutoZone.
Okay.
At every meeting, employees recite their company pledge.
Okay.
In unison.
Interesting.
Might seem a bit odd.
Yeah, a little bit.
But when you consider our social brains,
Okay, yeah.
it makes sense.
Yeah.
It taps into that deep-seated need for belonging and shared purpose.
Right.
Reciting the pledge together creates a sense of unity, reinforces the company's values.
Like a modern-day tribal ritual.
Exactly.
And this need for belonging ties into another concept
Okay.
Daniel explores.
Yeah.
Fairness.
Fairness.
Our ancestors relied on reciprocity and cooperation for survival.
Right.
Cheating or taking advantage would have been detrimental
Absolutely.
to the group's well-being.
He dives into some fascinating research
Okay.
using the ultimatum game.
Okay, I've heard of this.
Have you?
Yeah.
Where one person proposes how to split a sum of money with another person.
Right.
If the second person rejects the offer,
Right.
nobody gets anything.
Yeah.
It's amazing how people often reject offers they perceive as unfair.
Right. Even if it means losing out on money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It highlights how deeply ingrained our sense of fairness is.
It's not just about maximizing gain.
No.
It's about ensuring that everyone is treated fairly,
Yeah.
that the rules are followed.
It's fascinating.
And this has huge implications
Huge.
for the workplace.
Absolutely.
Think about how demotivating it is to feel like you're being treated unfairly by your boss or company.
Daniel shares an anecdote about struggling with job posting policies.
Oh, interesting. HR wanted every job posted
Okay.
for fairness, but managers argued that slotting pre-identified talent was fair.
To those individuals.
Yeah, it's a real dilemma.
It is.
It shows how this concept of fairness can get tricky in real-world situations.
So tricky.
And speaking of fairness, let's talk about another deep-seated need.
Yeah.
Autonomy.
Okay.
Daniel argues
Okay.
that our aversion to being controlled is deeply rooted in our evolutionary past.
Makes sense.
Our hunter-gatherer ancestors had a high degree of autonomy.
They were calling their own shots.
They made their own decisions, controlled their own schedules.
Like basically living the work from anywhere dream.
Right.
Except they were working to, not starve.
Right, for survival.
Yeah.
But then came the agricultural revolution.
Okay.
The rise of cities.
Yeah.
And suddenly we're working for someone else.
Oh, yeah.
Following their rules.
Yeah.
Living in a much more structured and controlled environment.
What a shift.
Talk about a shift.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
It does.
Why we still crave autonomy at work, being micromanaged or feeling stifled, can really zap our motivation.
It really can.
Daniel connects this to Daniel Pink's research on intrinsic motivation. Pink argues that autonomy, mastery, and purpose are key drivers of engagement.
And job satisfaction.
Yeah. So when our autonomy is stifled, our motivation takes a hit.
It makes sense.
We might go through the motions, but not feel truly invested.
We're not truly invested,
in our work.
Okay.
And that brings us to another fascinating piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
How our brains deal with uncertainty.
Yeah.
You know that feeling of unease?
Oh, yeah.
When you don't know what's coming next?
I do, yeah.
Our brains are wired to crave predictability.
Right.
It's a survival mechanism.
Back in the day, uncertainty often meant
danger. Yeah.
A rustling in the bushes could mean dinner.
Right.
Or becoming dinner.
Exactly.
And that uncertainty triggers a stress response.
Right.
Making it harder to think clearly.
Yeah.
And create.
And this has major implications.
Huge implications.
For how we handle change.
Especially in the workplace.
Especially in the workplace. Oh, absolutely. People often resist change.
Yeah.
Not because they're lazy or stubborn, but because their brains are essentially screaming, danger, woolly mammoth approaching.
That's a great way to put it.
So Daniel offers some solid advice
Yeah.
for leaders on how to mitigate this resistance.
Right. Clear communication is key.
Yeah.
Transparency as well.
Mm.
People need to understand the why behind the change and feel like they have some control over the process.
It's about creating that sense of psychological safety.
Exactly. When people feel safe and trust their leaders,
they're more likely to embrace change and navigate uncertainty effectively.
Now let's talk about ice cream thinking.
Ice cream thinking. Okay.
This is a term Daniel uses to describe our tendency to rely on intuition and emotions. It's often called System 1 thinking.
Right.
Instead of engaging in more deliberate, rational thought or System 2.
It's like grabbing a scoop of ice cream on a hot day.
Yeah.
It feels good in the moment.
Right.
But it might not be the healthiest choice in the long run.
I'm definitely guilty of ice cream thinking.
Y'all are.
Especially when I'm tired or stressed.
Yeah.
My brain just wants to take the easy route.
Take the easy route. I get it.
Even if it's not the best one.
Daniel uses a powerful real-world example to illustrate this.
Okay.
The 2008 financial crisis.
Oh, wow.
Even experienced financial professionals.
Yeah.
People who are trained to
think rationally. Right. Assess risk.
Yeah.
Got caught up in the hype.
Right.
Made risky bets.
Yeah.
It's a classic case of emotions overriding logic.
Yeah.
People got so excited about the potential for quick profits
that
they ignored the warning signs.
It happens.
And Daniel argues that this ice cream thinking is a product of our evolutionary past in a world where quick decisions were often necessary
for survival.
Relying on intuition and emotions made sense.
If you saw a saber-toothed tiger, you didn't have time to sit down and ponder.
Exactly. You had to react.
Right.
But in today's complex world, that same instinct can lead us astray.
So how do we avoid falling prey to ice cream thinking?
One key is simply being aware of our cognitive biases.
Okay.
Those mental shortcuts our brains use
to simplify decision-making.
Daniel also stresses the importance of slowing down, taking the time to analyze situations carefully, and seeking out diverse perspectives.
Different viewpoints.
It's about being mindful of our decisions.
And not letting our emotions completely hijack our thinking.
I like to think of it as giving my System 2 brain
I like
a chance to catch up and weigh in before I make a big decision.
That's a great approach.
Another important aspect of our ancestral minds is the knowledge illusion.
Knowledge illusion, okay.
The tendency to overestimate our understanding of things.
Yeah.
This one hits close to home. I often catch myself thinking I have a good grasp of a subject, and then I dig deeper and realize how much I don't know.
It's a humbling realization, isn't it? It is.
It highlights the importance of intellectual humility.
Yeah.
We need to be more aware of the limits of our knowledge.
The limits of our knowledge.
Be open to questioning our assumptions.
It's not just about knowing stuff.
No.
It's about knowing what you don't know.
What you don't know, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's a really valuable...
It is. And this ties back to the idea of our brains as prediction machines.
Okay.
We crave certainty.
Yeah.
We're constantly trying to predict what will happen next.
What will happen next?
This drive served us well.
Yeah.
In our ancestral environment.
Right. But in the modern world, it can sometimes lead us astray.
Lead us astray.
Daniel shares a few personal stories.
Oh, yeah.
To illustrate this.
Okay.
He talks about driving in Boston.
Ah, Boston.
Where the uncertainty of unfamiliar roads triggered a stress response.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But also heightened his focus and awareness.
It's like our brains go into overdrive when we're outside.
Yeah.
Our comfort zones.
Right.
We become more alert, more attuned to our surroundings.
He also talks about the anxiety he felt while waiting for a heart transplant.
Yeah.
That's a situation where the need for certainty is incredibly high.
It's huge.
But it's also completely out of his control.
Yeah, that's tough.
It's a powerful example of how our deep-seated need for predictability can
both help and hinder us.
Yeah.
It can make us more cautious, more prepared. But it can also lead to anxiety and fear when things are outside.
Outside our control.
Our control.
This has been so insightful.
It's fascinating stuff.
That's like we're getting a glimpse into the evolutionary control panel of our own brains.
It really is. It's amazing to see how these ancient instincts are still shaping us.
Yeah.
Our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors.
Today,
even now.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
But there's still so much more to unpack.
Absolutely. We've only just scratched the surface. Let's dive into another fascinating area Daniel explores. Personality. I think most of us assume it's about nature versus nurture, right? Like, are we born with certain traits or do they develop over time?
Yeah, that's what I always thought. But Daniel really digs into the science and explores how both genetics and environment play a role.
He explains the big 5 personality traits: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. These traits act as a framework for understanding how people typically think, feel, and act.
It's like a cheat sheet for understanding different personalities. For example, if you know someone is high in conscientiousness, you could probably guess they're going to be organized and reliable.
Precisely. But Daniel is also cautious about relying too heavily on personality tests. They can be helpful for providing insights, but it's important not to pigeonhole people based on those results.
Right. It's like assuming everyone who loves pizza also enjoys pineapple as a topping. Just because there's a correlation doesn't mean it applies to every single person.
That's a great analogy. Everyone is unique, and while personality traits can reveal general tendencies, they don't capture the full complexity of an individual.
Daniel also emphasizes that good leadership isn't about trying to force people to change their personalities. It's about understanding those differences and using them to build a strong and diverse team.
It's about finding roles that truly match people's strengths, rather than trying to squeeze square pegs into round holes. For example, someone who is highly introverted might not be the best fit for a sales position that requires constant social interaction.
But that same person might excel in a role that requires deep focus and analytical skills like a data analyst or a writer.
Exactly. Daniel highlights the importance of building a leadership team that values collaboration, humility, and psychological safety. This creates an environment where people feel comfortable sharing their ideas, speaking up, and taking risks without fear of punishment.
It's like creating a thriving greenhouse for a variety of minds. Now, let's switch gears and delve into one of the most mind-blowing aspects of the book. Our brains function as a prediction machine. Daniel argues that we crave certainty and are always trying to anticipate what's going to happen next. This drive, he says, is deeply rooted in our evolution.
It makes sense when you think about it. In our ancestral environment, predictability was essential to survival. Knowing where to find food, when the seasons would change, how to avoid predators, that knowledge was absolutely crucial.
So our brains evolved to be incredibly skilled at recognizing patterns and making predictions. But then comes the evolutionary mismatch, right? The modern world is filled with uncertainty. We're overloaded with information, constantly facing changes, and expected to make decisions without all the facts.
Exactly. It's like our brains are trying to run outdated software to predict the unpredictable. This can lead to anxiety, stress, and poor decision-making. Daniel uses some really vivid personal anecdotes to illustrate this point. He talks about learning to drive in Boston, a city famous for its chaotic traffic.
I can imagine. The uncertainty of the unfamiliar roads and aggressive drivers must have been really stressful.
It was. But Daniel also noticed that this very discomfort forced him to become more alert, more focused, and ultimately a better driver.
It's like our brains actually thrive on challenges. When we're forced outside our comfort zones, we learn new skills, broaden our perspectives, and become more resilient.
That's a great way to put it. Daniel also shares a very personal experience about the anxiety he felt while waiting for a heart transplant. That's a situation with incredibly high stakes where the need for certainty is paramount, but it's completely out of his control.
That's a powerful reminder that even in the modern world, with all our advancements, we're still affected by those primal forces that shaped our brains over millennia.
This leads us to another fascinating concept: ice cream thinking, a term coined by Daniel. It describes our tendency to rely on intuition and emotions, or System 1 thinking, instead of engaging in more deliberate, rational thought, which is System 2.
It's like grabbing a scoop of ice cream on a hot day. It feels good in the moment, but it might not be the healthiest choice in the long run. I know I've made plenty of ice cream thinking decisions that I later regretted.
We all have. And Daniel uses a powerful real-world example to illustrate this point: the 2008 financial crisis. Even seasoned financial professionals, individuals who are trained to think rationally and assess risk, got caught up in the hype and ignored warning signs, leading to some very risky bets.
It's a classic example of irrational exuberance overriding careful analysis. They were so convinced the market would just keep going up that they threw caution to the wind.
And Daniel argues that this ice cream thinking stems from our evolutionary past. In our ancestral environment, quick decisions based on gut feelings were often necessary for survival.
Like if you saw a saber-toothed tiger, you didn't exactly have time to analyze the situation and weigh your options. You had to react instinctively.
Exactly. But in today's complex world, those same instincts can have disastrous consequences.
So how can we overcome this tendency to lean on ice cream thinking?
Daniel emphasizes the importance of being aware of our cognitive biases, those mental shortcuts our brains use to simplify decision-making. He also stresses slowing down, taking time to carefully analyze situations, and seeking out diverse perspectives.
It's about engaging System 2, that more deliberate and rational part of our brains. We need to be mindful of our decisions and not let our emotions totally hijack our thinking. I like to think of it as giving my System 2 brain a chance to catch up before I jump into a big decision.
That's a great way to approach it. Now let's shift our focus to a topic that's both fascinating and a bit unnerving: the knowledge illusion. This refers to the tendency to overestimate our understanding of things, and it's something we're all susceptible to.
Oh, I am definitely guilty of this. I often catch myself thinking I have a good grasp of a subject, but when I start digging deeper, I realize how much I actually don't know.
It's a humbling experience, isn't it? It really highlights the importance of intellectual humility. We need to be more aware of the limits of our own knowledge and be open to questioning our assumptions.
It's like that saying, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Exactly. And this ties back to the idea of our brains as prediction machines. We crave certainty, and we try to make sense of the world. We often fill in the gaps in our knowledge with assumptions and beliefs.
It's like our brains are always trying to create a story, even if that story isn't entirely accurate.
Precisely. This can lead to all sorts of biases and blind spots in our thinking.
So what's the antidote to this knowledge illusion?
Daniel suggests cultivating intellectual curiosity, seeking out diverse perspectives, and being open to changing our minds when presented with new evidence.
It's about having a growth mindset, acknowledging that there's always more to learn and being willing to challenge our own beliefs. Now, let's shift gears to a concept that's deeply rooted in our evolutionary past: our social brains and the power of tribalism. Daniel explores how our brains are wired for connection and belonging, and how this drive can have both positive and negative consequences. You know, I keep thinking back to that incredible experience I had at the Steelers game in Baltimore. Being surrounded by fellow fans, all united in our support for the team, it created such a powerful feeling of connection. It was like we were part of a tribe, and that feeling was just intoxicating.
That's a perfect illustration of how our social brains operate. We crave belonging, and that often manifests in aligning ourselves with groups, even in seemingly arbitrary contexts like sports rivalries.
But this tribalism can also have a dark side, can't it?
Absolutely. When our sense of us versus them becomes too strong, it can lead to prejudice, discrimination, and even violence.
It's like our brains get stuck in a primitive mode, seeing the world in black and white, us versus them.
Exactly. And Daniel explores how this tribalism manifests in the modern world, from political polarization to workplace conflicts.
So how can we harness the positive aspects of our social brains while minimizing the negative ones?
Daniel emphasizes the importance of building bridges, fostering empathy, and recognizing our shared humanity. It's about seeing past superficial differences and understanding that we're all part of the same tribe, the human race.
He suggests that storytelling can be one way to achieve this. Sharing personal stories can build connections, foster empathy, and break down barriers.
Stories have the power to transport us into other people's experiences, help us understand their perspectives, and remind us of our shared humanity.
It's like that saying, a story's a bridge between two hearts.
Exactly. Daniel argues that storytelling is an incredibly powerful tool for leaders. It allows them to connect with their teams, inspire action, and create a sense of shared purpose.
It's about using the emotional power of narrative to build a more cohesive and collaborative work environment. Now, let's turn our attention to a topic that's often overlooked, but incredibly important: fairness. Daniel explores the evolutionary roots of our sense of fairness and how it played a crucial role in the survival of our ancestors.
Think about it. If you're living in a small tribe, cooperation is essential. You have to be able to rely on each other for survival.
Right, so if someone is constantly cheating or taking advantage of the group, It weakens that trust and cooperation, putting everyone at risk.
Exactly. Our sense of fairness developed as a way to ensure the survival of the group as a whole. And Daniel argues that this deeply ingrained sense of fairness is still very much alive in us today, influencing our behaviors and decisions in all sorts of ways.
He shares a great example from his own experience in HR, struggling with job posting policies. HR insisted on posting every job for the sake of fairness, but managers argued that slotting pre-identified talent was actually fairer to those specific individuals.
That's a classic dilemma. It highlights how complex the idea of fairness can be in real-world situations.
It shows that fairness isn't always about just following the rules. It's also about what feels intuitively right in a given situation.
Daniel also delves into some fascinating research using the ultimatum game, where one person gets to propose how to split a sum of money with another person.
I've heard of this. If the second person rejects the offer, nobody gets anything, right? It's a test of fairness and trust.
Exactly. What's fascinating is that people often reject offers they perceive as unfair, even if it means missing out on some money. It highlights how deep-seated our sense of fairness is.
It's almost like we're biologically programmed to punish cheaters.
That's a great way to put it. And this has huge implications for the workplace. When people feel they're being treated unfairly, it erodes trust, impacts morale, and can lead to conflicts and problems.
So fairness isn't just a nice thing to have. It's essential for creating a healthy and productive work environment.
This leads us to a topic that's particularly important to me: the importance of psychological safety in the workplace. Daniel explores how our ancestral past, with its emphasis on social status and hierarchy, can sometimes hinder open communication and collaboration.
It's interesting because we often think of the modern workplace as a meritocracy where everyone has an equal shot at success. But the reality is that our brains are still programmed to navigate social hierarchies, just like our ancestors did.
And those hierarchies can create all sorts of unspoken rules and power dynamics that can actually stifle innovation and creativity.
It's like people are afraid to speak their minds to challenge the status quo because they're worried about jeopardizing their standing in the hierarchy.
Exactly. And Daniel argues that leaders play a crucial role in building a psychologically safe environment where people feel comfortable taking risks, sharing ideas, and challenging assumptions without the fear of being penalized.
It's about creating a culture where people feel respected, valued, and trusted no matter their position in the hierarchy.
He suggests that one of the most effective ways to do this is for leaders to model vulnerability and humility.
It's about being willing to admit mistakes, ask for help, and create space for others to do the same.
Now, let's turn our attention to another fascinating aspect of our ancestral minds: our need for control. Daniel argues that this drive for autonomy is deeply rooted in our evolutionary past, where our hunter-gatherer ancestors had a high degree of control over their lives.
They decided when and where to hunt, how to gather food, how to structure their days. It was basically a work-from-anywhere lifestyle, except they were working to survive, of course.
But then came the agricultural revolution, the rise of cities, and suddenly we're working for someone else, following their rules, and living in a much more structured and controlled environment.
That's a dramatic shift. No wonder we still crave autonomy at work. Being micromanaged or feeling stifled can be a huge drain on our motivation.
Exactly. Daniel connects this to Daniel Pink's research on intrinsic motivation, which highlights the importance of autonomy, mastery, and purpose as key drivers of engagement and job satisfaction. So when our autonomy is stifled, our motivation suffers. We might do the bare minimum, but not feel truly invested in our work.
And that leads us to a key leadership challenge: how to create a work environment that fosters autonomy while still achieving organizational goals.
It's like finding that sweet spot between control and freedom.
Exactly. So how do we find that balance?
Daniel suggests that one way to do this is to focus on empowering employees. Give them ownership over their work and provide them with the resources and support they need to succeed.
It's about moving away from that command and control style of leadership and adopting a more collaborative and empowering approach.
Now let's move to a concept that might seem a bit counterintuitive at first: the power of uncertainty. While our brains are hardwired to seek predictability, Daniel argues that embracing uncertainty can actually be a source of growth and innovation.
It's like that saying, the only constant is change.
Exactly. And Daniel shares a great example from his own life, describing his experience learning to drive in Boston, which is known for its chaotic traffic patterns.
He was initially stressed by the uncertainty of the unfamiliar roads and aggressive drivers, but he realized that the discomfort forced him to be more alert, more focused, and ultimately a better driver.
It's like our brains actually thrive on challenges. When we're pushed outside our comfort zones, we learn new skills, gain new perspectives, and build resilience.
So how can we apply this to the workplace?
Daniel suggests that leaders create opportunities for employees to stretch their abilities, take on new challenges, and learn from their mistakes.
It's about fostering a culture of experimentation and continuous learning where mistakes are seen as a valuable part of growth.
This brings us to another powerful insight: the importance of awe. Daniel explores how experiencing awe, that feeling of wonder and amazement that often arises when we encounter something vast and mysterious, can shift our perspective and make us feel more connected to something larger than ourselves.
I remember standing on the rim of the Grand Canyon and feeling this overwhelming sense of awe. It was so vast and incredible that it actually made me feel small and insignificant, but in a good way. Like all my problems and worries just melted away.
That's the power of awe. It can help us put our lives in perspective, appreciate the beauty and complexity of the world, and feel connected to something bigger than ourselves.
It's a humbling and inspiring experience.
Exactly. And Daniel suggests that leaders can cultivate awe in the workplace by creating opportunities for employees to connect with nature, engage in creative activities, and witness acts of kindness and compassion.
It's about creating those moments that transcend the ordinary moments, that spark wonder and connect us to something larger than ourselves.
And this leads us to a final and perhaps most crucial point: the interconnectedness of all things. Daniel argues that we're all part of this incredibly complex web of relationships, and that our actions have ripple effects that extend far beyond ourselves.
It's like that saying, we're all connected.
Exactly. And Daniel encourages us to be more mindful of our impact on the world around us, cultivate compassion and empathy, and live our lives in a way that benefits not only ourselves, but also the entire ecosystem.
It's about understanding that we're all in this together, and that our actions can make a real difference in the world.
Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about another key aspect of our ancestral minds: status. Daniel examines the evolutionary roots of our preoccupation with status, exploring how it played a crucial role in the survival and reproductive success of our ancestors.
It's funny because in today's world, we often downplay the importance of status. We talk about equality and fairness, but deep down, our brains are still wired to seek status and recognition.
It's like we're all playing a game we're not even aware of.
Exactly. Daniel points out that this drive for status has biological roots. When we accomplish something that elevates our status, our brains release dopamine, which is that feel-good neurotransmitter. It's like we're getting a little reward for climbing the social ladder.
And this desire for status can be incredibly motivating. It can push us to achieve great things, innovate, create, and contribute to society. But it can also lead to unhealthy competition, envy, and even unethical behavior.
It's like that saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. People can get so caught up in chasing status that they lose sight of what truly matters.
Exactly. And Daniel suggests that leaders need to be mindful of this drive for status and create work environments that foster healthy competition while also emphasizing collaboration and teamwork.
It's about recognizing that a rising tide lifts all boats. When the team succeeds, everyone benefits.
And this leads us to a final and perhaps the most crucial concept: leadership. Daniel doesn't offer a simple formula for effective leadership. Instead, he examines the complexities of leadership through the lens of our ancestral minds.
You know, I used to think leadership was all about charisma, about having that certain it factor. But Daniel's perspective is much more nuanced. He argues that effective leadership is about understanding human nature, tapping into those primal instincts, creating a sense of shared purpose, and empowering others to reach their full potential.
It's about recognizing that leadership isn't a position, it's a process. It's about motivating others to work together toward a common goal.
And Daniel emphasizes that effective leaders need to be adaptable, resilient, and emotionally intelligent. They need to be able to read people, understand their motivations, build trust, and create a psychologically safe environment where people feel comfortable taking risks and sharing ideas.
It's about building a culture where people feel a sense of belonging, where they're valued, and where they can contribute their unique talents to something bigger than themselves.
And I think that's a beautiful way to sum up this deep dive into ancestral mindset. It's been a fascinating journey exploring those hidden forces that shape our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And I think the key takeaway is that by understanding our evolutionary past, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves, our relationships, and the world around us.
Absolutely. And this understanding can help us make better decisions, lead more effectively, and create a more just and compassionate world. It really is remarkable, how much our evolutionary past continues to influence us, even today.
Yeah, it's like we're carrying around, like, all these ancient instincts and biases that we're not even aware of.
Yeah, they're operating behind the scenes.
Totally. Yeah.
But the good news is, by understanding these influences, we can start to make more conscious choices.
Right, we can recognize them.
And navigate the modern world with greater awareness.
Exactly. It's like having a user manual for our own mind.
And speaking of user manuals, Daniel devotes a whole section to the concept of managing your inner chimp.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this inner chimp.
Well, he draws on the work of Dr. Steve Peters, a psychiatrist who uses the chimp analogy to represent the emotional, impulsive part of our brains. That part that reacts quickly, instinctively, often without thinking.
Without thinking.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like system one thinking.
Exactly.
That we talked about earlier.
That ice cream thinking.
Yeah, that ice cream thinking. That can sometimes lead us to make impulsive decisions.
Impulsive decisions, exactly.
Okay.
And Peters argues we all have this inner chimp.
Right.
But it's about learning to manage it.
Manage?
Not let it run wild.
Okay.
And he provides some really practical strategies.
Okay, like what?
Like recognizing your chimp's triggers.
Okay.
Pausing before reacting. Okay.
And challenging your chimp's irrational thoughts.
This is so helpful. I know I've definitely let my inner chimp take over.
It happens.
In certain situations, especially when I'm feeling stressed.
Yeah.
Or overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's like a rational brain just
takes a backseat.
It
does.
We've all been there.
Right.
The key is to develop self-awareness and strategies for calming our inner chimp.
Yeah, when it starts to get out of control.
It's like learning to train your inner pet.
Yeah.
Except it's a chimp.
Yeah. And it lives inside your head.
That's a great way to put it.
So this idea of managing our inner chimp ties into another important concept that Daniel explores.
Yeah.
Emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence.
This is something I hear a lot about.
Yeah.
Especially in the context of leadership. Yeah, it comes up a lot.
But what exactly does emotional intelligence mean?
Yeah.
And how does it relate to our ancestral minds?
Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and manage your own emotions and the emotions of others.
Right.
And Daniel argues that it's a crucial skill for navigating the complexities of the modern world.
Especially in the workplace.
Yeah, for sure.
But isn't emotional intelligence something we're born with?
That's a good question.
Like some people are just naturally more empathetic. Or better at reading emotions than others.
Well, there may be some genetic predisposition. Emotional intelligence is also something we can develop and improve over time.
Okay.
And Daniel provides some really practical tips for doing just that.
Like what?
Yeah.
Give me some examples.
Well, one key is developing self-awareness.
Okay.
Paying attention to your own emotions.
Yeah.
Recognizing your triggers, understanding how your emotions impact your behavior.
And then another is practicing empathy.
Right. Trying to see things from other people's perspectives and understand their emotional states.
So it's about honing our ability to read both our own emotions and the emotions of others.
It's like becoming an emotional detective.
An emotional detective. I love that.
Yeah.
And this skill is especially important for leaders.
For leaders, yeah.
You know, it's funny. I used to think that great leaders were those who were like, super charismatic and outgoing. But as I've learned more about leadership, I've realized that emotional intelligence is far more important than charisma.
I couldn't agree more. Leaders who are emotionally intelligent are able to build strong relationships, motivate their teams, create a positive and productive work environment.
And this all circles back to those core themes we've been discussing. Understanding our ancestral minds. Recognizing our evolutionary mismatches. And developing strategies for thriving in the modern world.
In the modern world.
It's been such an eye-opening conversation.
Exploring these ideas with you.
Like
the ancestral mindset is a treasure trove of insights. I encourage everyone listening to check it out.
Absolutely. This book has definitely given me a new perspective on myself and the world around me.
That's great.
I feel like I have a better understanding of why I do the things I do.
That's wonderful.
And that's incredibly empowering.
That's the beauty of knowledge.
Yeah.
It gives us the power to make more conscious choices.
Yeah.
And live more fulfilling lives.
So true. Well, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into Ancestral Mindset.
It does.
By John Daniel.
John Daniel. Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating world of our ancestral minds with us.
It's been a great journey.
And remember, while our brains may be rooted in the Stone Age, we have the power to shape our future.
Absolutely.
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
What was your biggest takeaway from this episode?
I'm curious to know.
Head over to the comments section.
Yeah.
And let us know.
Let us know.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to subscribe.
Subscribe.
And share it with your friends.
Share the knowledge.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Keep
learning.
And keep diving deep.
Dive deep. See you next time.